Welcome to Glamorous Stories. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell for more. Sit tight and let's dive in. The city of Ravencourt never slept. Its streets shimmered with the glow of glass towers, its alleys hummed with restless lives trying to survive another day. But while others rushed to chase dreams, Elara was chasing something simpler. Enough coins to keep her little brother in school and a roof above their heads. Every morning before the sun rose, she tied her hair into a loose braid, buttoned her faded gray uniform, and whispered a silent prayer before stepping into the chill dawn. Her reflection in the cracked mirror was calm but tired, eyes the color of burnt honey, skin dulled by cleaning chemicals, hands rough but steady. She worked for the wealthy in Ravencourt's Golden District, people whose marble floors she scrubbed while they drank imported coffee and laughed about vacations she'd never afford. Yet Elara never envied them. She believed every life had its purpose, and hers was to serve with dignity. "Someday things will be better," she'd tell her brother Milo each night. He'd nod, pretending to believe her, though they both knew the rent was due again in 2 days. That morning, Elara walked past the bakery where the smell of fresh bread teased her empty stomach. The baker smiled kindly but didn't offer her any. She wasn't a customer, she was just the maid who mopped the bakery floors after closing. As she reached the tram stop, a gust of cold wind blew through the narrow lane, lifting scraps of newspaper around her shoes. One headline caught her eye: Donovan Enterprises celebrates record profits. She sighed softly, tucking the paper into her bag to use later as kindling. Wealthy names like Donovan, Kingsley, or Rowe meant nothing to her world. Hers was the world of laundry lines, second-hand shoes, and bills that never seemed to end. Her first employer of the day was the Kingsley Mansion, a sprawling estate perched above the city like a silent judge. Inside, Mrs. Kingsley's voice echoed across marble halls. "Elara, the chandelier must shine this time. Last week it looked dull in the photos." "Yes, ma'am," Elara replied, forcing a polite smile. She climbed the ladder carefully, her hands trembling as she wiped each crystal piece. Below her, Mrs. Kingsley's daughter, a girl barely 16, complained about her dress color. "Mother, pink is for last season. Everyone's wearing lavender now." Elara tried not to listen, but the words stung. Lavender was a luxury she only smelled in soaps she couldn't buy. Hours later, when the workday finally ended, Elara's back ached, her knees screamed, and her palms burned. She collected her wages, half of what was promised as always, and began her walk home through the gray streets. The sky had turned bruised with rain clouds. Streetlights flickered awake one by one, glowing halos in the mist. She held her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her boots splashing through puddles. As she neared her neighborhood, the old quarter where buildings leaned like tired men, she heard the familiar sounds of life. Children laughing, pans clattering, someone singing off-key. It was poor but it was home. She stopped by Mrs. Doyle's tiny shop to buy bread and milk. "Long day, Elara?" the old woman asked, counting out the change. "Same as always," Elara said, smiling faintly. "But at least I can still stand." "You've got your mother's spirit," Mrs. Doyle said kindly. "That woman could face a storm and still come out smiling." Elara's smile faltered. "I wish she was still here." "She is," Mrs. Doyle said softly. "Right there." She touched Elara's chest, over her heart. Elara nodded, throat tight, and left. The rain had started by the time she reached their small apartment, a single room above a mechanic's shop. Milo was waiting, homework spread across the table. His face lit up when he saw her. "Elara. Look, I finished my essay early." "That's wonderful," she said, setting down the food. "Now we can eat before it gets cold." They shared bread, dipping it in watered-down soup. The wind howled through the window cracks, but laughter filled the room as Milo told her about school. For a while life felt warm. After dinner, she tucked him into bed, brushing his dark curls from his forehead. "You'll do great things one day, Milo," she whispered. "You'll be everything I never could." "Only if you're there to see it," he murmured, half asleep. Elara smiled. "Always." She stayed by his side until his breathing steadied, then cleaned up quietly. The clock struck 11. Outside, thunder rolled like distant drums. She blew out the lamp and stood by the window, watching rain streak the glass. Down below, the street was empty, except for a flicker of movement near the alley. A figure stumbled, then collapsed beside the dumpster. Elara frowned. Probably a drunk, she thought, but something in her chest tugged. She hesitated. It wasn't safe to wander at night, but what if he was hurt? Without another thought, she grabbed her shawl, slipped on her shoes and ran downstairs. The air smelled of wet metal and gasoline. The figure lay motionless, face hidden beneath tangled hair, clothes soaked and torn. She knelt beside him, checking for breath. He was alive, but barely. His forehead was cut, blood mixing with rain. "Hey," she whispered urgently. "Can you hear me?" No response. She looked around, no one else in sight. "Oh, saints help me," she muttered, and with surprising strength she lifted his arm over her shoulder and dragged him inside. By the time she got him upstairs she was shaking from effort. She laid him gently on the couch and fetched a towel. As she cleaned the wound she noticed his hands, smooth, uncalloused. Not a laborer's hands. His clothes, though filthy, were tailored once. Something didn't add up. But she didn't ask questions. She covered him with a blanket, lit the small heater and sat beside him, exhausted. His face looked peaceful now, almost angelic in the dim light. "Who are you, stranger?" she murmured. "And what brought you to my doorstep?" The rain softened outside, pattering like a lullaby. Elara leaned back, her eyelids heavy. She didn't know that this night, the night she offered kindness to a broken boy, would change her life forever. But for now she simply watched over him, the way the poor watch over hope, afraid it might slip away if they look away too long. When dawn crept over Ravencourt, its light seeped through the cracks of Elara's thin curtains, painting her small room in soft gold. The faint hum of morning traffic echoed below, mingled with the whistle of the kettle heating on the stove. Elara rubbed her eyes and stretched, her back still sore from the night before. Then she froze. The memory of dragging the unconscious stranger through the rain rushed back like a dream she wasn't sure was real. She turned toward the couch. He was still there. The boy, or rather the young man, lay curled under the thin blanket, his chest rising and falling steadily. In the daylight, his face looked even more delicate. High cheekbones, a straight nose, lips pale from the cold. His dark hair, matted and damp, clung to his forehead. Elara noticed again how clean his nails were, how refined his features seemed despite the dirt. Something about him whispered out of place. She tiptoed closer, setting a cup of water on the small table beside him. "You're lucky I found you," she muttered softly. "Another hour out there and you'd have frozen solid." As she reached to adjust the blanket, his eyes snapped open, clear gray, sharp with confusion. He sat up abruptly and Elara stumbled back, startled. Who are you?" His voice was hoarse but firm. "I should be asking that," Elara replied, regaining her composure. "You were unconscious in the alley last night. I brought you in." He blinked, looking around at the small, cluttered room, the peeling wallpaper, the flickering lamp, the little desk crowded with Milo's schoolbooks. "This is your place?" "Yes," she said, crossing her arms. "You don't remember anything?" The young man frowned, pressing his fingers to his temple. "I remember running. At lights. Then nothing." "You must have hit your head," Elara said, tilting hers. "There's a cut. I cleaned it, but you might need a doctor." He shook his head quickly. "No doctors. Please." The desperation in his tone caught her off guard. "All right," she said slowly. "No doctors. But you need to rest. I'll make something to eat." He looked at her as if trying to place her, this stranger with warm eyes and worn clothes who'd saved him without question. "Why did you help me?" Elara stopped by the stove, pouring water into a small pot. "Because you needed it." "That simple?" "Yes." She gave a small shrug. "Kindness shouldn't be complicated." He studied her for a moment, then gave a faint smile. "You're unusual." "I get that a lot," she said dryly, stirring the soup. When she turned around again he was trying to stand. His legs wobbled and she rushed to steady him. "Hey, you're in no shape to walk." "I can't stay here," he said under his breath. "Why not?" He hesitated. "It's safer if I don't." Elara frowned. "You talk like you're running from someone." His lips twitched. "Maybe I am." "Well, until you can walk without falling on your face you're staying put," she said firmly. "You can leave after breakfast." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the smell of soup silenced him. His stomach growled audibly. Elara hid a smile. "Sit," she ordered, pointing to the chair. He obeyed, almost sheepishly. As he ate she watched him. The way he held the spoon, carefully, like someone who wasn't used to hunger. His manners were refined, too refined for a street drifter. Whoever he was, he'd come from a world far from hers. "This is good," he said quietly. "It's just broth and potatoes," Elara replied. "Still good," he insisted. His eyes softened. "Thank you." She nodded, brushing off the compliment, though it warmed her more than she expected. "So what should I call you?" He paused mid-bite. Call me. Kai. Kai, she repeated. That's short for something? Just Kai, he said, his tone final. All right then, Kai. I'm Elara. He gave a small nod. Elara, he repeated slowly as if testing how the name felt on his tongue. It suits you. Her cheeks colored faintly. Eat your soup before it gets cold. They finished breakfast in silence, the only sounds the clinking of spoons and the soft murmur of rain outside. Afterward, Elara cleaned up while Kai watched her, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Where's your family? He asked suddenly. My brother's at school, she said, glancing toward the empty cot. It's just the two of us. He nodded thoughtfully. And you work as a maid? Yes. I clean for people who forget I exist 5 minutes after I leave. She smiled faintly. It pays enough to keep us alive. That doesn't seem fair. Fair? Elara laughed softly. Fair is a word for people who can afford to complain. Kai looked down, unsure how to respond. The guilt in his eyes didn't escape her. She wondered again what kind of life he'd lived before ending up here. Hours passed quietly. Elara had to leave for her afternoon job at the Donovan Hotel, but she couldn't just leave him alone. She scribbled a note and placed it beside the couch. Rest. There's bread and tea on the counter. Don't open the door for anyone. Then she slipped out. Kai stared at the note long after she was gone. Her handwriting was neat but firm, like her voice. He leaned back, thinking of her kindness, of the way she'd looked at him without judgment. The name Donovan on her uniform that morning made his chest tighten. He had once stood in the penthouse of that same hotel, his last name gilded on the top floor. Now he sat here, nameless, in the apartment of a woman who had nothing but compassion to give. He closed his eyes and saw flashes of memory, his father's stern face, the blinding headlights, the screech of tires. He pushed the thoughts away, swallowing hard. For now he was just Kai, the stranger in the maid's home. When Elara returned that evening, drenched from the rain, she found him sweeping the floor. You're supposed to be resting, she scolded. I wanted to help, he said, smiling faintly. I owe you. You don't owe me anything, she replied, though the warmth in her chest betrayed her words. Just don't overdo it. He looked around the room at the small signs of her life, photos, sewing threads, a faded painting of a sunrise. You've made this place feel alive. Elara chuckled. Alive is a generous word for this mess. I mean it, Kai said, his gaze sincere. You've built something from nothing. That's rare. She met his eyes then, and for the first time she saw not a stranger but someone carrying secrets, pain, and perhaps a story that could break her heart if she ever learned it. Outside, the rain continued to fall softly, washing Ravencourt streets clean. Inside, two souls from different worlds shared the warmth of a single room, one finding refuge, the other unknowingly offering redemption. The days that followed slipped by quietly, like rain down a window pane. The boy Elara had rescued, now calling himself Kai, had recovered enough to move about the small apartment, though a faint bruise still lingered near his temple. He never complained of the pain, never mentioned where he'd come from, and never spoke of returning anywhere. It was as if his past had been erased the moment Elara found him. Elara didn't press. She wasn't the kind of person who demanded answers from fate. All she cared about was that he seemed kind, grateful, and capable of standing on his own again. Still, there was something about him she couldn't quite place. The way he spoke with measured grace, the way his eyes sometimes drifted to the window as if searching for something far beyond the city's smog. One morning, as Elara buttoned her uniform before heading to work, Kai spoke up from the couch. You're leaving early again. Yes, she said, tying her braid. Mrs. Kingsley wants her floors done before her charity brunch. Apparently, the mayor's wife will be there, and the marble has to shine like heaven. Kai smiled faintly. Sounds exhausting. It is, Elara admitted, slipping on her worn shoes. But tiredness doesn't pay rent, so off I go. He stood, a little unsteady still, and said, Let me walk you. She raised an eyebrow. Walk me. You can barely walk yourself. I'm fine, he said, taking a few careful steps toward the door. Besides, I owe you at least that much. Elara hesitated but nodded. The streets of the old quarter were waking up, vendors shouting, engines growling, the air thick with the smell of roasted chestnuts and damp stone. They walked in silence at first, their breaths clouding in the cool morning. After a while, Kai spoke softly. It's strange, walking without knowing where you belong. Elara glanced at him. You really don't remember anything? No family, no friends? He hesitated. Fragments. Faces I can't name. A house with tall windows. a voice shouting my name. Maybe it'll come back with time, she said gently. Maybe, he murmured, though his tone carried doubt. When they reached the tram stop, Elara turned to him. You should rest today. I mean it. You've done enough wandering for a lifetime. He smiled, that quiet, careful smile that seemed to say more than words ever could. I'll try. As the tram pulled away, Elara caught a glimpse of him in the gray light, standing on the curb like a lost memory, tall, solemn, and achingly out of place. By evening, when she returned home, the apartment was spotless. The dishes were washed, the floor swept, and the air smelled faintly of fresh herbs. Milo was laughing, a rare, bright sound that filled the room. Look, Elara, he said. Kai fixed the old radio. It plays again. Elara blinked. You fixed that? It's been dead for months. Kai shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag. Just a loose wire. It was nice to have something to do. She stared at him, half amused, half impressed. You're full of surprises. Milo chimed in eagerly. He also helped me with my math homework. He's really smart. Kai smiled modestly. It's just arithmetic. Elara arched a brow. Arithmetic? Milo's teacher says his class is doing advanced geometry. Kai froze for a second, realizing his slip, then said carefully, I guess some of it came back to me. She narrowed her eyes, curiosity prickling, but she let it go. Instead she said, well, I can't complain about free tutoring. Just don't spoil him too much. That night after dinner, the three of them sat together by the small heater. The old radio crackled softly with a love song from decades past. Milo dozed off halfway through his story, his head resting on Elara's lap. Kai spoke quietly, watching the boy sleep. Adores you. He's all I have, Elara said, her voice barely above a whisper. After our parents died, it was just the two of us. I promised I'd give him a better life no matter what it takes. Kai nodded, his expression unreadable. You're stronger than most people I've met. She laughed softly. That's what people say when they don't know what else to call surviving. He looked at her, then really looked at her, the faint freckles on her nose, the calluses on her hands, the quiet fire in her eyes. You deserve more than this life, he said suddenly. Elara blinked. And what life would that be? A palace? A car with windows that actually close? Maybe one where you don't have to fight so hard just to breathe, he said, his tone solemn. Her gaze softened, but she masked it with humor. Well, if you find that life lying around somewhere, do let me know. He smiled faintly, but his eyes were distant again, as if haunted by something just out of reach. Days turned into weeks, and Kai became part of their quiet rhythm. He helped Mrs. Doyle carry her deliveries, repaired leaking pipes, and even sang with Milo as they washed dishes. The neighbors began calling him Elara's lodger, though whispers soon followed. He's too well spoken to be a drifter, one woman muttered outside the shop. Maybe he's hiding something, another said. Elara ignored them. She'd learned long ago that gossip was the music of the poor, loud, constant, and meaningless. One evening, as the sun dipped behind Ravencourt's towers, Kai waited for Elara outside the tram stop. She looked exhausted, her apron stained, her hair escaping its braid. Rough day? He asked. Mrs. Kingsley's cat got into the cake again, she said dryly. Apparently that's my fault. Kai chuckled. You have the patience of a saint. Patience, she said, is cheaper than quitting. They walked home side by side, their shadows long on the cobblestones. For the first time, Elara noticed how natural it felt. His presence, his quiet humor, the way he carried her groceries without being asked. When they reached her door, he turned to her. Elara, he said softly, if I told you I wasn't who I seem, would you think less of me? She frowned. What does that mean? He hesitated, then shook his head. Forget I said that. Just, thank you. For trusting me. Elara tilted her head, searching his face. I don't trust easily, Kai. But something tells me you needed someone too. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Then I'm lucky it was you. That night, as Elara lay awake, she thought about his words. Not who I seem. The phrase echoed in her mind long after the lights went out. But as sleep pulled her under, one thought lingered stronger than fear. For the first time in years, the apartment didn't feel lonely. And neither did she. The morning light in Ravencourt was merciless, sharp, white, and cold. It cut through the smog and flooded Elara's small apartment, landing on the chipped wooden table where Kai was mending one of Milo's torn school shirts. His fingers moved carefully, the thread looping through the fabric with quiet precision. For someone who claimed to remember little of his past, his hands carried the memory of gentleness, not the kind of skill one gained from hardship, but one learned from leisure. Elara stepped out of the tiny washroom, toweling her hair. You don't have to do that, she said. I've been sewing holes in that shirt for months. It's practically held together by prayers. Kai smiled. Then I'm reinforcing your prayers. He bit the end of the thread and tied a neat knot. There. Good as new. Elara shook her head, amused. You're spoiling us, Kai. Next thing I know, you'll be baking bread from scratch. I could, he said simply. If I can find yeast. She blinked. You know how to bake? He hesitated. I think so. I remember kneading dough as a child. There was a kitchen. Big windows. Someone laughing. His eyes flickered, distant for a moment, then dimmed. It's strange, how pieces come back like broken glass. Elara softened. Maybe that's a good sign. Maybe your memory's healing. Maybe, he murmured, though his tone was unreadable. Just then Milo burst through the door, waving a wrinkled newspaper. Elara. Mrs. Doyle gave me this. Look. Elara took the paper, frowning. Milo, since when do you read the business section? I don't, he said breathlessly. But look at the picture. She followed his finger to the front page headline. Millionaire's son missing after accident. Family offers reward. Beneath the bold letters was the photo of a young man, his face handsome and familiar in an unsettling way. He wore a tuxedo, his expression calm but distant, as though posing for a future he never wanted. The caption read, Kai Donovan, 23, heir to Donovan Enterprises, last seen 3 nights ago following a car accident outside Ravencourt Central. Elara felt her breath catch. The name. The face. The sharp jawline and gray eyes, clearer now than she remembered in the rain. Kai Donovan. Her gaze flicked toward the couch. Kai stood frozen, staring at the paper, his expression unreadable. Milo blinked between them. He looks just like. Elara interrupted quickly, like someone who's had better days. She folded the newspaper and set it aside, forcing a light tone. People can look alike, Milo. Now go wash up. Breakfast's getting cold. Milo frowned but obeyed. The moment the door closed behind him, the room fell silent except for the hum of the kettle. Elara turned slowly. Kai. He didn't meet her eyes. So you've seen it. Tell me the truth, she said quietly. Is that you? He took a long breath. It's complicated. That's not an answer. He looked up then, and the weight in his gaze made her chest tighten. Yes, he said finally. That's me. The words hung in the air like thunder waiting to break. Elara stared at him, at the boy she'd found bleeding in the alley, who'd eaten her soup and fixed her radio, who laughed with her brother like family. And now he was saying he was that Kai, the son of one of Ravencourt's richest men. She sank onto a chair, her mind spinning. So all this time, you've been lying to me? Kai stepped closer. No, I didn't lie. I just didn't remember everything. After the accident, I hit my head. When I woke up, I didn't even know who I was. Not until now. And you remember everything now? She asked, her tone sharper than she meant. Not everything, he admitted. But enough. My father and I, we argued that night. About the company, about expectations. I left angry. Then there was a crash. I don't know who pulled me out or how I ended up near your building. Elara pressed her palms to her temples. Saints above, Kai, or should I say Mr. Donovan? Don't, he said softly. Don't call me that. I'm still the same person you found. She looked up at him, hurt flickering across her face. The same person? The same person who's been living in my home while the whole city searches for you? I never meant to deceive you, he said, his voice low but steady. When I first woke up here I felt safe. For the first time in my life. No expectations. No cameras. No one wanting anything from me. Just you. Elara's heart twisted, torn between anger and compassion. She wanted to shout, to tell him he had no right to bring his secrets into her fragile world, but the sincerity in his eyes silenced her. After a long pause, she asked quietly, What will you do now? I don't know, he admitted. If I go back, my father will lock me in his tower of glass again. I wanted to see what life was like outside the gold cage. I didn't expect to find someone who'd make me wish I'd left sooner. Elara felt heat rise to her cheeks and she turned away. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? They're true. Because, she took a breath. Because people like you and me live in different worlds, Kai. When this city talks about your kind, they're talking about the ones who own it. And people like me are just the ones scrubbing its floors. He stepped closer, voice soft but firm. You make it sound like kindness belongs to one world and not the other. Maybe it does, she said bitterly. For a moment neither spoke. The rain outside had started again, soft and steady against the windows. Then Milo burst back in, holding a half-eaten slice of bread. Elara. The radio said they're offering 100,000 crowns for information about that missing boy. Elara forced a smile. That's nice, love. Go finish your breakfast. Kai's expression darkened. They'll keep searching. The Donovans have resources everywhere. It's only a matter of time before someone finds me. Then you can't stay here, Elara said quietly. If they trace you they'll think I kidnapped you or worse. I can't risk Milo's safety. I would never let anything happen to you or your brother, he said earnestly. That's not the point, she whispered. He looked at her with a mix of sorrow and admiration. You saved me, Elara. Not just my life, me. I won't forget that. She swallowed hard. Then do me a favor, Kai Donovan. Don't make me regret it. He nodded solemnly. I won't. That night, long after Milo had gone to bed, Elara sat by the window, the newspaper folded on her lap. The city lights glimmered far below, cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the powerful Donovan family searched for their lost heir. And here, in a tiny apartment above a mechanic's shop, he slept. No longer a stranger, but no longer the boy she thought she knew. The world outside buzzed with whispers of a missing millionaire's son. But in this room, silence reigned, the heavy kind that came when truth arrived uninvited and refused to leave. Days passed, and the rhythm of Elara's small world began to change in ways she didn't entirely understand. The stranger she had rescued, now the quiet, thoughtful young man named Kai, had started weaving himself into her life like he had always belonged there. What began as cautious gratitude slowly grew into something gentler, something that filled the silence between her long work hours and the gray monotony of survival. Each morning, Elara woke before dawn, her uniform pressed and her hands already chapped from scrubbing. But now, when she left for work, Kai would walk her halfway to the tram stop, carrying her cleaning pail with an awkward sort of gallantry that made her laugh despite herself. You don't have to do this, she would say every time. I know, he'd answer with that small smile. That's why I want to. It was a simple thing, but it felt like a luxury, to be seen, to have someone wait for her return. One afternoon, when she came home exhausted from another 12-hour shift, the smell of something warm greeted her before she even opened the door. Milo, she called. Her little brother ran up, beaming. Elara. Kai cooked dinner. Real food, not just soup. She stepped inside, stunned. The table was set with 2 plates of pasta, steam curling in the air. Kai stood behind it, sleeves rolled up, a wooden spoon in hand and a sheepish grin on his face. I hope it's edible, he said. Milo supervised. Milo puffed up proudly. I told him when the noodles looked done. Elara laughed, setting her bag down. You two are going to spoil me. They ate together, and for the first time in months the apartment didn't feel small, it felt full. They talked about everything and nothing. Milo's school, Mrs. Doyle's gossip, the stubborn leak in the ceiling. Kai listened more than he spoke, but when he did, his words carried warmth. You know, Elara said teasingly, you do chores, cook and fix radios. You're going to ruin my reputation as a struggling maid. Kai chuckled. I'm just repaying a debt. That's nonsense, she said firmly. You don't owe me anything. He met her eyes across the table. Then let's say I'm doing it because I want to. Her cheeks flushed and she looked away, pretending to focus on her food. Milo, oblivious, chattered happily about school projects, but Elara felt the air shift, a quiet awareness blooming between her and Kai, fragile but undeniable. Later that evening, the 3 of them gathered by the small heater. Milo had insisted on hearing a story, and Elara was halfway through telling one their mother used to tell, a tale about a poor shepherd who fell in love with a princess, when she noticed Kai watching her, not the story. His expression was unreadable, soft yet intent. When their eyes met, he looked away quickly, smiling faintly as if caught doing something forbidden. After Milo fell asleep, Elara began cleaning up. Kai stood to help her, but she shook her head. You've done enough for today. Go rest. He hesitated, then said quietly, I don't like seeing you wear yourself out. She laughed gently. That's just life, Kai. You work until you can't and then you start again. But it shouldn't be that way, he said. You deserve more than this. More than a life spent scrubbing floors for people who don't even look at you. Elara turned to him, a soft defiance in her eyes. And what do you know about what I deserve? He paused, realizing how it sounded. I didn't mean. I know what you meant, she interrupted. But listen to me, Kai. I don't need pity. What I need is the strength to keep going. And that I already have. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then slowly Kai smiled, not with pity but with admiration. You're remarkable, Elara. She looked down, heart pounding. You say that like it's something rare. It is, he said softly. That night, long after she had gone to bed, Kai stayed awake on the couch, staring at the flickering shadows on the ceiling. Her words echoed in his mind, her pride, her quiet courage. He had grown up in a world where money could buy almost anything, but he realized now that the things he valued most were the ones Elara carried effortlessly. Honesty, resilience, warmth. The next morning he woke early and surprised Milo by helping with his schoolwork. Your sister says you're clever, Kai told him. Prove her right. Milo grinned. I will. But you have to help me with fractions first. By the time Elara returned home, the small apartment was filled with laughter again. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them, the young man who had once been broken and lost, now smiling as he helped her brother solve math problems. It hit her then how much their lives had changed since that rainy night. Kai was no longer just a stranger she had rescued. He was part of their rhythm, their days. The thought both comforted and frightened her. That evening, as the sky turned violet over the city, they all sat on the rooftop. Ravencourt stretched before them, a maze of lights and noise. Elara wrapped her arms around her knees. It looks beautiful from here, she said. Kai nodded. Beautiful, but cruel too. She smiled faintly. That's Ravencourt. It gives nothing for free. He turned to her, his voice low. And yet you still give everything to it. Elara's heart stuttered at the tenderness in his tone. Someone has to. Their eyes met in the fading light, and for one long moment, the city's chaos fell away. There was only them, the maid who refused to break and the boy who had lost his name. Milo interrupted the silence with a yawn. I'm cold, he murmured. Elara smiled and stood, ruffling his hair. Come on then. Time for bed. Kai followed them back inside, but as he closed the door, his gaze lingered on her. There was something he couldn't name growing in his chest, something fierce and impossible. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know that soon the truth would shatter everything they'd built. But for now he allowed himself to feel it, the rare peace of belonging somewhere with someone who saw him not as an heir, not as a burden but simply as Kai. The afternoon sun dipped low behind Ravencourt's skyline, casting long shadows through Elara's narrow window. She was kneeling on the floor, scrubbing a stubborn stain from the corner rug. It was a quiet day. Milo was at school and Kai had gone to the market to help Mrs. Doyle. Elara tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to him, to Kai Donovan, the heir of an empire she could never even step inside without a pass. Since learning the truth, every glance, every shared smile felt heavier, as though something fragile balanced between them. She wanted to hate him for hiding who he was, but she couldn't. He had never treated her with arrogance or pity. He had washed dishes, laughed with Milo, and mended shirts with the care of a brother. And yet, every time she looked at him, she saw the newspaper headline in her mind, Millionaire's son missing. He didn't belong here. He never had. The door creaked open and Kai stepped in carrying a small bag of apples. Mrs. Doyle said to give you these. She insists they're too bruised to sell. Elara smiled faintly. She's kind. Even her bruised apples taste better than anything from the market. Kai placed the bag on the counter. I think she just likes you. She likes everyone who pays her tab on time, Elara said teasingly. So that's not me. Kai chuckled, then hesitated. Elara, may I ask you something? She looked up. You just did. But go on. He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. If I told you I wanted to start over, to live differently, do you think that's foolish? She studied him. You mean without your father's money? Without any of it, he said quietly. The wealth, the name, the expectations. All of it feels poisoned. I spent years watching my father build towers while people like you kept them shining. I don't want to go back to that world. Elara sighed. You can't run from who you are forever, Kai. That world will find you eventually. It always does. He looked at her earnestly. Then maybe I'll stop running when I find something worth standing still for. Her cheeks flushed at his tone. You talk like a poet sometimes. Must be the rich boy education peeking through. Maybe, he said, smiling softly. But I'd trade every book I ever read for a day of peace like this. She turned back to scrubbing, her voice barely above a whisper. Peace isn't free, Kai. It's something you earn by surviving. Before he could respond, a loud knock thundered against the door. Both of them froze. Elara's heart jolted. No one ever visited at this hour. Are you expecting someone? Kai asked, voice low. No, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Stay quiet. She opened the door just a crack, and the sight on the other side stole her breath. Two men in dark suits stood in the hallway. Behind them, a sleek black car waited by the curb, gleaming like a threat. Miss Voss, one of them asked politely, flashing a badge. Detective Rayner. We're looking for someone. A young man, early 20s, dark hair, gray eyes. Last seen in this district. Elara's pulse quickened. I haven't seen anyone like that. Before she could close the door, another voice spoke sharply from behind her. That's enough, Elara. Kai stepped forward, his expression calm but resolute. The detectives straightened immediately, their eyes widening in recognition. Sir Kai Donovan, the first one breathed. We've been searching everywhere for you. Elara turned to him, stunned. Kai. He met her gaze with quiet apology. I can't hide any more. The detectives exchanged glances. Your father's been beside himself, sir. He sent us personally. He's waiting at the Donovan estate. You should come with us at once. Kai nodded slowly, then looked at Elara. May I have a moment? The men hesitated, then stepped back to wait by the car. Elara's voice shook. You're just going to go with them? I have to, he said gently. If I keep running, I'll only bring trouble to you and Milo. I can't risk that. You don't owe me anything, she said, fighting the lump in her throat. He stepped closer. That's where you're wrong. I owe you everything. You gave me kindness when I had nothing. When I didn't even know who I was. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. Don't say that. You're going back to your world now. Don't make it harder than it already is. He smiled faintly, though pain flickered behind it. You make it sound like a sentence. Isn't it? She whispered. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers. Elara, when I was lying in that alley, I thought my life was over. Then you appeared and everything changed. You showed me what real humanity looks like. Don't ever think of yourself as poor, you're the richest person I know. Her voice trembled. You don't mean that. I do, he said softly. And I'll prove it. Someday. Before she could reply, the detective stepped forward again. Sir, we really must go. Kai released her hand slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Goodbye, Elara. The word hit her like a blade. Goodbye, Kai. He turned and followed the men to the car. She stood in the doorway, her breath shallow, watching as the black vehicle pulled away and disappeared around the corner. The street felt emptier than it ever had before. Inside, the apartment was silent. The apples sat on the counter, untouched. The room still carried his presence. The faint scent of soap, the neat stitching on Milo's shirt, the repaired radio quietly humming in the background. Elara sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. 4 weeks, this stranger had turned her life upside down, filled her home with laughter and warmth. And now, all that remained was the echo of his voice. Milo came home hours later, confused to find her staring out the window. Elara? Where's Kai? She smiled weakly. He had to go home, love? Will he come back? Elara looked at the fading light outside, the city already swallowing the last traces of him. I don't know, she said softly. I really don't. That night, as she lay awake, she heard the distant hum of cars and imagined one of them carrying him farther away with every passing second. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she whispered into the darkness, Be safe, Kai Donovan. The rain began again, tapping against the glass like a heartbeat, steady, constant, and painfully familiar. The days that followed passed like a fog Elara couldn't shake off. Kai's absence sat heavy in the small apartment, an unspoken silence that even Milo's laughter couldn't fill. She went through her routines like clockwork, scrubbing floors, polishing glass, sweeping endless marble corridors that gleamed under lights she could never afford to switch on at home. But no matter how much she worked, her mind refused to rest. Every corner of Ravencourt seemed to whisper his name. She'd see him in reflections, his faint smile on tram windows, the shape of his shoulders in passing strangers. It made her chest tighten each time, but she reminded herself, he's back where he belongs. The millionaire's son. The Donovan heir. She had been just a small detour in his story, a chapter he'd eventually forget. Still the ache lingered. One evening, Elara stopped by Mrs. Doyle's shop for bread. The bell chimed as she entered, and the old woman looked up with a knowing glance. You've been quieter these days, dear. Something on your mind? Just work, Elara said, forcing a smile. Same as always. Mrs. Doyle wiped her hands on her apron and studied her. Funny, work never made your eyes look like that before. Elara busied herself selecting loaves. You're imagining things. I'm old, not blind, the woman said gently. Sometimes people come into our lives to remind us we're still capable of feeling something. Doesn't mean they were meant to stay. Elara froze, her hands tightening on the bread. I never said it was about someone. You didn't have to, Mrs. Doyle said softly. Take the bread. It's on the house. That night, back home, Elara found Milo asleep on the couch with the radio humming faintly. She turned the dial to silence it, but before she could, the announcer's voice caught her attention. In other news, the Donovan heir has made his first public appearance since his disappearance. Sources say Kai Donovan was found alive and well after several weeks missing. The Donovan family has not released details, though insiders claim the young man is expected to take a leadership role in the company soon. Elara's breath hitched. Her hands trembled as she turned off the radio. He was safe. Alive. Already stepping back into his golden world. A part of her should have felt relief. But another part, a deeper, quieter one, felt like something inside her had been folded up and locked away forever. The next morning she worked at the Donovan Hotel again. The marble lobby gleamed brighter than usual, filled with flowers and chatter. She overheard two maids gossiping near the service desk. Did you hear? Mr. Donovan's son is back. Apparently he was missing for weeks. I heard he was mugged and left in the street. Imagine, someone like him. Still he's back now. Probably never set foot outside the penthouse again. Elara tightened her grip on the mop handle. Every word felt like a tiny needle in her chest. She turned away before they could see the look on her face. By the end of her shift, exhaustion clung to her like dust. As she stepped outside, the sky broke open in a sudden downpour. She ducked under the awning, watching raindrops blur the city lights. Miss Voss. The voice behind her was deep, uncertain, and achingly familiar. Her breath caught. Slowly she turned, and there he was. Kai stood in the rain, hair-soaked, coat clinging to his shoulders. But this wasn't the Kai she remembered. His posture was straighter, his clothes finer, his face pale but composed. The soft gentleness she'd known was shadowed by something heavier, responsibility perhaps. Or guilt. Kai, she breathed. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair. You're still calling me that, he said softly. That's the name you gave me. He gave a small, almost broken smile. Then it's the one that still feels real. She folded her arms, trying to steady her voice. What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in your mansion or your board meetings or wherever heirs belong? I needed to see you, he said. To explain. There's nothing to explain, she said quickly. You went home. That's where you were always meant to be. He took a slow breath. Elara, I didn't just go home. They found me. I didn't have a choice. Maybe not then, she said, but you have choices now. And you didn't choose to come back until today. He flinched. You're right. I should have come sooner. But my father, he's already planning my life again. Meetings, press, responsibilities I never wanted. Every minute feels like I'm drowning in a life that isn't mine anymore. Her eyes softened despite herself. Kai. I kept thinking about you, he said, stepping closer. About the night you found me. About how I felt seen for the first time in years. You didn't care about my name. You cared about the person bleeding in the rain. That's what anyone decent would have done. No, he said quietly. That's what you would do. Elara swallowed hard. You can't be here. People will talk. You'll ruin yourself. Then let them, he said, voice firm. Let them say whatever they want. I'm tired of pretending. Pretending what? That I don't feel like I left the best part of myself in that apartment, he said, eyes locked on hers. With you. Her heart twisted. Kai, stop. You're saying things you'll regret. This, whatever it was, it can't happen again. You. Me. That's the truth. The truth, he repeated bitterly. Funny how truth feels like punishment sometimes. She looked away, blinking fast. Go home, Kai. Don't make this harder. He hesitated, his voice breaking slightly. Will you at least tell me you don't feel anything? Elara opened her mouth, but no words came. The lie caught in her throat and dissolved into silence. He nodded slowly. That's what I thought. He turned, walking into the rain, his figure blurring into the gray storm until he disappeared. Elara stood there long after, the sound of rain pounding in her ears, her chest aching with everything she wanted to say but couldn't. When she finally went home that night, she found Milo asleep again, clutching the repaired radio. The room smelled faintly of apples, though none remained. She sat by the window and watched the rain trace trembling lines down the glass. Truth, she whispered to herself, hurts worse than lies ever could. And somewhere in the heart of Ravencourt, behind the steel gates of the Donovan mansion, Kai stared out another window, feeling the same ache, the same hollow silence, and wondering how the world could be so full of light yet feel so unbearably empty without her in it. A pale dawn broke over Ravencourt, painting the city in silver and rose. The streets were still slick from last night's rain, glistening like veins of glass beneath the awakening light. Elara walked slowly up the long gravel driveway of the Donovan estate, her heart thudding in her chest like a trapped bird. Her cleaning apron was neatly folded over her arm, her hair tied back, and her hands trembled despite her efforts to still them. She had been sent here that morning by her employer's agency. The instructions had been simple: temporary staff needed at the Donovan mansion for a special event. She hadn't realized where she was going until the tram had stopped at the Golden Gates. By then it was too late to turn back. The mansion loomed ahead like a sleeping giant, its stone walls veined with ivy, its vast windows reflecting the brightening sky. Elara paused before the tall oak doors, trying to calm the storm inside her chest. It had been weeks since Kai left her world behind. She'd seen his face once more in the papers, standing beside his father at a charity gala, dressed in a tailored black suit and smiling politely. He had looked every bit the man of wealth he was born to be, untouchable, distant, and heartbreakingly far from the quiet boy who had eaten soup at her tiny table. Now, fate had brought her here again as if to remind her of the distance between them. A butler opened the door. "You must be Miss Voss," he said briskly. "You'll report to the head maid in the West Wing. Be quick, we're behind schedule." "Yes, sir," she murmured. She followed him through vast corridors that seemed carved from marble and silence. Chandeliers glittered above her, throwing diamonds of light across polished floors. Everything was immaculate, cold, perfect. The kind of perfection that only money could buy and only loneliness could maintain. When she entered the ballroom, a group of maids were already bustling about, dusting and arranging flowers. "You there," said the head maid, handing her a cloth. "Clean the east windows. Make sure there's not a streak left when the sun hits them. The Donovans are expecting guests this afternoon." Elara nodded, moving wordlessly to her task. The glass stretched from floor to ceiling, and as she wiped it, her reflection merged with the cityscape outside, a faint ghost caught between two worlds. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her until a familiar voice spoke, soft but certain. "Elara." Her hand froze mid-motion. The cloth slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor. She turned slowly. Kai stood in the doorway, dressed not in his usual sharp suit but in a simple white shirt and rolled sleeves. His hair was slightly tousled, his expression a mixture of surprise and something deeper, something like longing. For a moment neither of them spoke. The noise of the other workers faded into nothing, as if time itself had stepped aside to give them this one moment. Elara found her voice first, though it came out barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." He smiled faintly. "I live here. You know what I mean." Kai stepped closer, his shoes clicking softly against the marble. "When they told me staff from your agency were coming today, I didn't believe it. I thought I was imagining it again." "You shouldn't have come down," she said, eyes on the floor. "People will talk." "Let them," he said quietly. "I've stopped caring what they think." She looked up then, searching his face for traces of the boy she'd known. And there he was, behind the polished surface, behind the calm air's mask, the same warmth, the same ache. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "You have everything now. You don't need to come looking for someone like me." He shook his head slowly. "Everything I have feels empty without you." Her breath caught. "Don't say things like that. You don't mean them." "I mean every word." His voice trembled slightly but his eyes held steady. "Elara, when I was lost you gave me shelter. When I had nothing you treated me like a person, not a name. I've spent weeks in this house, surrounded by people who bow and smile, and not one of them sees me the way you did." She looked away, her throat tight. "We live in different worlds, Kai. You can't change that." "I'm not asking to change the world," he said softly. "I'm asking to find my place in yours." Elara let out a shaky laugh. "You think it's that easy? You think you can just walk away from all this?" "I already have," he said, and before she could protest, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "I told my father I won't take over the company. I want to build something else, something real. I'll work, earn, fail if I must, but it'll be mine." She stared at him, stunned. "You did what?" "I don't want a life built on walls of gold," he said. "I want one that means something. You taught me that." Her vision blurred as tears welled up, unbidden. Kai, don't throw away your future because of me. He smiled gently. You're the reason I finally see one. At that moment, the head maid called from across the room, breaking the spell. Miss Voss. Those windows won't clean themselves. Elara wiped her eyes quickly and bent to pick up the cloth. I should get back to work. Kai knelt beside her, his voice low enough for only her to hear. Please don't send me away again. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not the millionaire's son, not the runaway heir, but the same boy she'd found in the rain, lost and human and full of heart. I don't know if this can work, she whispered. He smiled softly, pulling a small bouquet of wildflowers from behind his back, fresh, delicate, and imperfectly beautiful. Then let's start with something simple. Elara blinked, her heart swelling with emotion. You remembered. Of course, he said. They were the first thing you ever smiled at when we walked home that morning. Her fingers brushed the petals as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. You shouldn't kneel like that, Kai. I'm not kneeling for who I am, he said quietly. I'm kneeling for who you are. The woman who taught me what wealth really means. The words broke something inside her, something she had been holding back for far too long. She let out a soft, trembling laugh through her tears and whispered, Please get up. He rose slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. So, does this mean you'll let me stay? She hesitated only a moment before nodding, her voice barely a breath. Only if you promise to stop calling me poor. Kai smiled then, the kind of smile that reached all the way to his eyes. Deal. Outside, sunlight spilled through the windows, scattering across the ballroom floor. The city of Ravencourt shimmered in the distance, unaware that within the cold heart of its richest mansion, 2 lives had quietly rewritten what it meant to be rich. Elara placed the bouquet on the table beside her, the colors glowing in the light. And for the first time in years she felt no distance between their worlds, only warmth, only truth, only home. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next story.